Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly ship show. My name is Jason Brand. I am the Director of Outreach and Partner Development here at Supply Chain Solutions. So for this week, we've got our freight market roundup, but more specifically today, we're going to make this a blitz roundup. So you got to prepare yourself for a knowledge gavage. We're going to try to get all this out to you in under 10 minutes. It's going to be a record. Let me tell you, back with me and Anthony, sometimes we'd have like a 50-minute show. Really good quality stuff. But, today, under 10 minutes. In, out, on your way. That being said, next week, we do have a longer form episode. I'm going to be diving into China. I'll talk about that a little bit today, but there's just so much going on. It's critical everyone really understands the fragile environment that we're in right now because after the pandemic, we were supposed to have, disruption free for a little bit. And that, quite frankly, hasn't been the case. So we need to kind of keep everyone informed on, the potential for the next disruption. Anyways, one of our goals. But I'm getting away from the main point here. Blitz, freight market. First up, ocean rates. Second up, air rates. Third up, a couple major events we got to talk about. Let's just dive in. So, rates in the Trans-Pacific. And when I'm talking about ocean rates on the Trans-Pacific, I'm talking about specifically focusing on ships that are coming out of China and Southeast Asia, and they're headed into the U.S. West Coast. Currently, the price is rising. Actually, we're seeing a lot of activity on this lane when it comes to price changes. And it's because there's a huge difference between the short-term and long-term rates at the moment. So our lowest rates we caught last week for our customers was right around $3,600. Now, contrast that with the highest rate last week, which was around $5,200. And this is totally in part due to ocean liners going through a contracting period right now. And that average contracting rate has been pretty high. It's been up in the $5,000 range. Now, the dilemma here is while we are seeing really healthy volume, I went through that last week, it's not quite at a point to pull that spot market rate right up to the contracted rate, but it is happening, and it's currently happening right now. So, use this as kind of a canary in the coal mine for where rates will be headed, because 5,200, and this is early in the contracting period, and we'll get into more of this later. Anyways, let's move on. That is Trans-Pacific. That's specifically talking about Southeast Asia, China, moving into the U.S. West Coast. I want to add in actually a lane here this week. Interesting week to add a lane, blitz freight market, but hey, it's really, really important. It's getting more important too. So a lot of shipping patterns have been changing lately. And, we talked about how there was sourcing shifts happening. People were moving out of China, nearshoring, things along that line. But at the end of the day, there's been a big winner in the lanes of the world, and one that's very closely tied to the U.S., and that is the Southeast Asia, China to Mexico lane. So that's another Trans-Pacific lane, and I want to focus on that one real quick. So if we go back into our customers' records and what our customers are paying for that lane, we actually saw, it was relatively reasonably priced back in early April, but since then, it has become markedly more expensive week over week. As an example, for our customers, the lowest price we saw back in April was around, actually under $2,000 per 40-foot container shipping from China, Southeast Asia, coming down into Mexico. Now, if we fast forward to last week, we are seeing the costs for those same shipments right under the $4,900 price point. And, what's interesting if we go back, right? So it's going from under $2,000 to just last week, right under $4,900. Back at the under 2,000 point, that was cheaper than the comparable US West Coast rates. Now at the $4,900 point, that's, as we mentioned, much more expensive than the US West Coast rates. Very, very interesting. What's also unique about this is unlike what we're seeing in the US West Coast, where there was a pretty remarkable increase in price. And that is the contracting season kind of starting here, down from the Asian realm coming into the Mexican realm, or South Mexican realm. We are seeing just a very, very steady and remarkable increase in price. Now, it's a blitz. We got to talk more about this, but let's move on. So moving over to our rates on the transatlantic, which specifically is our ships heading out of Europe and heading into the eastern ports of the US. we are seeing a totally different story from what we're seeing from the Trans-Pacific realms. We're seeing actually a pretty stable rate, but if anything, it's actually a slow decline in price. There are actually some factors we've been talking about week over week that have to do with this. But if we look back roughly a month and a half, it's been very, very stable. Actually, it's only gone down our average by around $50. We're sitting right at the $1,900 per 40-foot unit price point, which is very, very impressive. Now, let's move into the air freight realm as we speed through this on our Blitz Freight Market Roundup. I'm loving that term. Anyway, currently the prices, if you are shipping out of China and Southeast Asia across all destinations in the US, we're seeing the average on the low end right now at around $570 a kilo. And then on the high end, we're seeing the average at right around $680 a kilo. So I'd like to continue kind of talking about this trend of really the Mexican business kind of booming at this moment and really increasing. So we mentioned this earlier, but Lufthansa, well, we didn't mention the air bit earlier, but we did mention this from the ocean bit. Lufthansa just announced this week a new air freighter service between Frankfurt and Monterrey. And, we do actually have a consolidation program in this lane. We do have customers that are currently shipping that consolidation into Mexico in this lane. And what's cool is this added support from Lufthansa is just going to be fantastic for us. So if you are air shipping into Mexico, or if you're in a situation where, you need some, either whether it be a sample or you just need an expedited shipment, the consolidation program is an excellent option. We're actually reserving space on only air freighters, not passenger jets, but only air freighters. There's a variety of reasons for that. And we've got that space booked every single month. So you are able to get a better rate and better service. It's actually a program just between us and our German partner, LLS. It's highly managed and pretty cool. So make sure you reach out to us if you are in a pickle on that lane and you need to get some air freight there for a reasonable cost. Now, I need to move over to the biggest news because something massive happened this week. You're going to have to keep your eyes on this for the next couple months, and that is this new Chinese tariff on electric vehicles. It could be taking that existing number, the existing tariff of roughly around 25%, and it could be bringing it all the way up to a 100% tariff. Now, there is just so much going on here that next week's show is really going to have to dive into detail about what's happening in China and, currently how they are fitting into the world stage and some of the risks, the concerns, and some of the moves that they are choosing to do right now. It's going to be very valuable for our customers that are currently using suppliers in that region because, as you know, when the tariffs kind of came into effect, earlier, we had a bunch of Chinese companies start to build these subsidiary companies outside of mainland China. And, so China's been a really, really effective manufacturer of the world. And despite those tariffs, they've continued to kind of hold that stance. With these recent moves, it's just going to be, it's very critical to keep your eyes on this and make sure you have a diversified supplier base just to ensure, in the situation of a disruption, obviously, and this is a massive disruption as well. Granted, this is on electric vehicles, but this will trickle down. And actually that leads right into my next point. China has said it's likely going to use retaliatory measures in response to this tariffs, and it likely will be economic or, retaliatory tariffs. So keep in mind and, watch that. Another concern is that China could kind of sidestep the US in general and actually build manufacturing plants right in Mexico to, evade tariffs, kind of like I was mentioning. And in that circumstance, what's going to happen is, likely we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, the US, and renegotiate the agreement or just completely ban Chinese electric vehicles. And that would affect, existing brands like Volvo and Polestar, already having a little bit of a tough time with these current tariff situations. So something very important you got to keep your eyes on. And this is, again, it's not just electric vehicles. It's kind of like the entire green initiative that's going to be hit by these tariffs in a period of time, depending on how we're able to come through these agreements. Now, there are a lot of angles on this. Next week, I'm going to talk about a little bit more on this, but there's a lot of stuff going on in general we need to talk about. So let's move on. The recent import numbers from 2024 so far, they've really actually caused a lot of analysts to update their forecasts for the remainder of the year, and that's great. I love to quote these guys, the National Retail Federation. They actually had a bunch of really bullseye targets that they they do put a lot of they do put a lot of guesses out there, right? So, maybe hitting the bullseye every once in a while is in their odds, but they really have been pretty on point. Even during the pandemic, they were the canary in the coal mine for a couple situations, which has been great. But they and Hackett Associates, they're currently forecasting now that loaded import volumes at the top 12 U.S. container ports are going to remain above 2 million TEUs through October 2024. And this is a massive, massive forecast. If that's the case, that's a humongous step towards supply chain stability, something we have not seen since the pandemic. And that really will mean we'll be off to a great start in 2025. So we can only hope so. Now, some of the reason behind these updated forecasts is May currently. And we talked about this in previous weeks. Restocking seasons have not been the same in many years. And May right now is going to be the first month this year that's going to be projected to hit the 2 million TEU threshold. And, we haven't seen that since October 2023, but obviously October, we're dealing with peak season. And in May, we're dealing with restocking season. But that really is a strong indicator of a, good potential recovery for the remainder of the year. So very excited about that. Some good news, but let's move away from the good news and go back to some bad news. So negotiations happening between on Canada's West Coast and a foreman's union, they have completely stalled. And it is really raising the risk of a labor disruption at the ports of Vancouver, and Prince Rupert. Now, the federal government is attempting to prevent a rail strike. Currently, at the moment, the Canadian Labor Minister has requested that the Canadian Industrial Relations Board assesses whether a strike would harm Canada's health and safety. So essentially, they are trying to prevent a strike until that study is complete. We've gone in the past talking about, because we had a couple rail issues as well, and we went into just how the U.S. government and specifically rail strikes has been part of our history. So they're definitely going to find it is going to harm health and safety of Canadians, around their nation. So keep that in mind. Now, there is a whole bunch going on in the world at this moment. I'm already at 12 minutes. I can't believe it. It's probably because I said freight market blitz so many times, but I really appreciate you guys joining us. Next week is entirely focused on China, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a longer form episode, really breaking down all the intricacies there. So make sure you sign in, make sure you register. You're going to be attending, and I'm going to see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us today, and make it a great week. Bye, everybody.